nowhere does it say you have the right to privacy. Well, where do we hear about right to privacy? Again, this case law. There's been a dispute between two people, and it goes up to the Supreme Court. The justices have created a de facto right of privacy. And interestingly enough, right to privacy came about from abortion cases, people that wanted to get abortions. There were different state laws that says you can't kill a baby at this stage in gestation, or you can't do this, you can't do that. And people wanted to challenge some of those laws, and they went up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court says, well, there's this right to privacy within a woman in her own body, in her own marriage, and things like that. And so you now have these concepts of separation of church and state and right to privacy that are constitutional issues, but not necessarily in the document themselves. And why is that important to know the distinction? Because they often refer to the Constitution as a living document that it can change and modify. It's always based on what a reasonable standard is. And what was reasonable 50 years ago may not be reasonable today, and may not be reasonable 50 years from now. So it's always going to be evolving and changing. And that's very important to talk about. One last thing, and then I'll sit down. I know I have 10 minutes. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments grant us what's called equal protection. Okay? And that means that you don't get any more rights than I get as a citizen of the United States. And that goes for any citizen that is either born here or naturalized here. Everyone across the board gets the same equal protection. And those are the 13th, 14th, and 15th. 13th Amendment is actually the amendment that abolished slavery here in the United States. So all the people here were considered free and could not be servitude. And the 15th Amendment gave those then liberated ex-slave males the right to vote. But it's the 14th Amendment that really talks about the equal protection, and I'm going to read a little bit about that. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the states wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So that talks all about what rights you have as a citizen of this nation. And that's important because I know there was an issue very soon thereafter 9/11, and there were a number of, I don't know what term they used at the time, insurgents maybe, that they placed at Guantanamo Bay. And essentially they said, we're going to hold you at our own whim for as long as we want to, because you don't get equal protection under the law. And why is that? Because they're not citizens. So when they would want to go to court and say, well, hey, I'm being mistreated here in Guantanamo Bay, I'm being mistreated here, they don't have any standing in any court in the United States because they're not granted equal protection of the law as all citizens are. Now, there is an amendment that it's kind of a catch-all amendment, which I think is the one they eventually prevailed under, which was the Fifth Amendment. And the Fifth Amendment gives us the language about no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of laws. And this typically comes up in criminal cases. You can't be arrested without reasonable suspicion. They can't just take your house. They can't take your property. They can't take your life unless they have gone through the due process of laws, which means going through the proper channels to do what they need to do. And the difference between the 14th Amendment, equal protection, and the Fifth Amendment is it never talks about citizenship as being a requirement of losing these due process rights. It talks distinctly about no person shall be held for this, that, and the other. And so, you know, I have to commend a lot of the cases that came up after Guantanamo Bay because it made that distinction, and it made it very clear that the Constitution, while it is a very powerful document, it does have its limitations. And so to often know a document's power, you have to know its limitations. And so the American government cannot do what it wants to do willy-nilly all the time without due process of law. So while everyone may not be seen as a citizen with equal protection, they are guaranteed certain processes of law by simply being a human being that Allah created. All right.
Thank you.